Second. We're back in public session. Student presentation. This month, the student presentation will be brought to us by Shore Middle School. 8th grade jazz band will be performing 2 songs. Billie Jean by Michael Jackson and All Them Leaves by Ryan Eric Adamson. Please join us across the hall in the gym for this special presentation.
Nice to see you. You did say that, yes.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Look at my dog.
It was the theme from the workshop we went to for school boards.
I'm sitting in your chair.
I did that earlier today. Do you want it? But you're most welcome.
It's a little low, because I had to raise you already. No, I was choking.
Yeah. It's
No, I'm okay. I'm
you
okay.
sure?
Yeah. Trust me, I'm okay.
They were excellent.
They were very good. 8th graders.
He's gonna go get it.
The tones
I
they
was
got out of
choking, but not
Also, I need
anymore.
water, so.
Convention.
Need a mic check or?
This one.
Give it a test?
We just watched of the Shore Jazz Band 8th graders. Kudos to them and their instructor and the parents for encouraging them to stick with the instruments, to practice, and to give it all they have. Next on the agenda is student presentation. All right, my seniors, his last year of high school.
I know. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. I can't believe it's already November. We're approaching the end of the first quarter, the first marking period, and November definitely goes by so quick because of like all the days off and the half days. So it's just like time's flying, the school year's going by, but everything overall at the high school has been great. I know last month I spoke about hallway decor. Let's just say the court of public opinion disagrees with the results, but the juniors won first and the seniors won second. But we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it.
Bruno, you don't talk about
no.
it.
Someone's a little mad about
He
it.
did predict that when you guys left.
It did.
I did.
Yeah. But then also, like, it was just overall amazing, like, just seeing all the school spirit with that, and, like, everyone coming together to have, like, a fun, friendly little competition. And then homecoming also happened, which was really good. I feel like it just gets better every single year. It sold out this year as well, just like last year. We had a photo booth. It was just a overall fun night. The French club started back up, and so they have their Quebec trip coming up for French students in February, I believe. So I know they had like an interest meeting for that. And then the Chinese Culture Club next Monday, they have a snack sale. They started snack sales for just like Asian snacks, just like to promote that. So that's next Monday. The mock child team started up for the school year, so it is technically a club, but it operates more like a sport. So it's like they have like a season from like October to January, and then we have the competition in January, like the county-wide competition, and we have scrimmages and practices with other schools before that. So that's why it's more similar to a sport. So we got that team like all ready to go, and now we're starting to prepare for the case. I know last year I mentioned that me and Tom, we actually both do the Safety Ambassador program, which is sponsored by Robert Wood Johnson Hospital, and so that's restarting this year. We registered late this year, so we missed the summit, but we had the summit come to us yesterday, so we had representatives from Robert Wood Johnson Hospital come and teach the 12 or so ambassadors that we have about how we're going to go ahead and teach the Eisenhower students about the importance of safety, how to cross the street, pedestrian safety, wheeled sports safety, wearing a helmet, things of that nature, because it's important to teach that at a young age. And then also with college applications happening and like early deadlines coming up. Ms. Chalkis has been doing a great job with that. Like all the seniors that are working to apply to college feel so supported. We have open college workshops. So basically, like if students have permission from their teachers to leave class, they can go to Ms. Chalkis, sit down with her, and like it's a group, but you can really work with her one-on-one as well and get like your application revised, any questions you have. And then when that's not happening, Ms. Chalkis has been hosting college visits with schools coming in all the way from New Hampshire. Like honestly, like I think they're international schools as well, just coming in and like providing the students an opportunity to see what the school is without having to actually go and visit them. So definitely kudos to her. Like she's been dedicating her lunch periods to us. So that has been absolutely amazing. There's many new clubs at the high school. I feel like we're always growing. The amount of extracurriculars always keep growing. We have a psychology club. We also have the Centennia, I believe is what it's called. It's the Chieftain, but a magazine version of it. So we already have the school newspaper, but now it's like a literary magazine. It's like more of a creative magazine. So I know that's very exciting. And then also for students that are interested in a career in education, there is a PHS Future Educators Club that started with Ms. Chalkis advising that. So I know many students were interested in that, and it's great that we actually have that now at the school. Last week or so, the marching band got first place at the East Brunswick Festival, and I know many students were excited about that, and that was absolutely amazing. And then also on October 19th, the Muslim Student Association held an open meeting to Stand with Palestine, where information on how to raise awareness and support for the humanitarian crisis was shared with students, so they too can get involved. And also on that note, the administration as well as the counseling departments and the Haven especially started a P-Way for Peace group, and that was shared I believe on Wednesday, so I don't have much information on that yet, but from what I gathered, it's just a space to support healing and work towards peace, especially with the current events that are going on currently in the world. So I think that's definitely a step in the right direction. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you so
That's
much.
right.
You mentioned Future Educators Club. Can you say a little bit more about that? And it's
Um,
very apropos because right now, after COVID, there is a statewide, also cause a teacher shortage.
Right.
So is this something, that club that formed based around that, or?
I know one of my friends started it. I'm not completely sure like what spearheaded that.
I can help you with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, Mr. Baldessano and I talked about that, last year. And our hope is that the club turns into articulation courses with colleges. And this way our kids would go to school and come back and teach for Piscataway.
Wow, great.
This is step one. Thanks, Rahim.
Thank you, Rahim. So, good evening. I hope you all are doing well. First of all, happy Dias de los Muertos, which is Day of the Dead for those who celebrate. Going off that, Spanish Club and students in Spanish classes actually decorated the G Wing and the F Wing hallways in the high school. It's pretty much like a setup of altars, and we had a project where you pretty much researched one of the deceased, and we decorated all the posters, and it looks really nice in the hallways. Next, the homework assistant program and tutoring has started. Science National Honor Society, they have a program through Science Buddies, pretty much volunteers, you can have volunteer hours, and also the Writing Center has opened for students who need it. I know just recently they started like a student athlete program where it's like involved with the Haven for athletes that are like struggling with time management and just overall to help. The Science League started, which has been a great hit too. I know it's focusing with like physics and chem, and for students that are struggling or just want to increase their academic involvement. As well, I know there's going to be competitions involved, so that's something to look forward to. As like the seniors, there's also been junior counselor meetings. So like Miss Brewster has been scheduling meetings to talk about GPAs and SATs and just overall help navigate through junior year. I know I mentioned National Honor Society last month. Applications have been like submitted, and we're waiting to hear back on that. Just recently, FBLA had their huge Haunted High, which was a huge success. There was many children and volunteers. it was very fun. Like, it was so exciting to see all the children coming and dressed up. There was so many fun costumes, and even on Halloween, I saw so much school spirit. And regarding sports, middle school football just had an undefeated record from 6-0, and they just played at a championship game to Union on Wednesday. So that's something we can pride ourselves on. Most of the seasons have ended for sports, and they're now taking their off season before winter starts. And pretty much like everything's going well. The marking period's ending in 2 weeks, so it's just catching up. So that's it.
Great,
Tanvi,
thank
I
you.
have a question
Yes.
for you. For the athletes who need help with time management or academic support, who's the best point of contact for that?
I'm not necessarily sure yet, just because they just.
Tommy, I can help with that?
Yeah.
So-
Yes, thank you.
So this is something, again, Chris and I spoke a lot about in supporting, a group of kids who would have some time after school. A lot of kids don't have practice right away.
Right.
Things like that. So if you're asking who would be the contact, it would be the Haven to start,
Okay,
okay? And then the counseling office would absolutely have information on that.
great, thank you so much.
I'm sure the coaches are probably giving that
Yeah,
information.
so, yep, absolutely.
All right, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah, get home safely, it's dark now.
yeah, we're getting into these winter hours, shorter days, darker nights, but be safe going home, and thank you for coming out and giving your
Yeah.
reports tonight. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the President's Report. As Dr. Ranelli mentioned at last month's meeting, we are very excited to learn that our district has once again been selected as one of the best districts in New Jersey by the niche.com. We in Piscataway know the many wonderful things that make our district great, but this recognition by an outside organization lets the rest of the state know as well. We are particularly happy with the high ranking we receive for diversity, which is always a point of pride in our community. Our district ranked 13th among the most diverse districts in the state, with 8 of our schools ranking in the top 25 individually for their grade level. Eisenhower came in number 1 in the state for the most diverse elementary schools in New Jersey, which exemplifies the incredible learning environment that our schools are providing for our students. We also are very proud that our district communications won 3 awards at the recent New Jersey School Communication Awards. I, along with Dr. Ranelli, Dr. Connors, Ms. Lane, Ms. Cordino, and several of our top administrators were on hand for the award ceremony in Atlantic City to cheer on our public information officer, Gary Miller, as he accepted these awards. The district was honored with the first place for photography, second place for simplicity publication for our school guide and calendar, and third place for media relations. Piscataway was one of just 2 districts to win 3 awards. Congratulations to Mr. Miller and everyone who contributed to his success, which shows the priority our district puts on transparency, two-way communication, and celebrating the success of our school, staff, and students. Congratulations again, Gary. And I also want to give a congratulations to Dr. Gray, who's sitting over there quietly working with Diverse and Equity, which he is spearheading in the district and doing a wonderful job of. So congratulations to you for your hard work. It's all paying off and showing. And right now, one of my fellow board members she's going to give a statement on behalf of speaking for herself, but this speaking on some of the things that are going on presently in the world. So Ms. Sarah
Madam
Rashid.
President, before we go there, just on the math, I just wanted to say, you said 13th on the niche.com, but considering there's about 600 public school systems, that's top 2.2%. So that's significant.
Now, in case you were wondering, now you got the percentage where we fell in that. Dr.
Yeah,
Connors
yeah.
broke that down correctly.
13th, but it's the 13th out of 600.
And my apologies, I didn't give you the percentage that we fell in under, which is the top 0.1%.
2.2, I think.
That's pretty good.
Okay, Sarah Rashid.
All right, we're all here for our business meeting, but I wanted to take this moment to say at least one thing. We have to acknowledge that it is very difficult right now to witness and process all the human suffering that's happening on the other side in the Middle East. According to some news sources, almost 420 children are either killed or injured every day for the last 1 month. And that's very hard as a parent. The least we can do is acknowledge the human suffering on that side. This has given a lot of rise to hate crimes on this side, and I want to take this moment to say that we all should stand up against that, speak up, and continue our good work. That's it.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
If anyone else would like to say a few words or speak, now's your time. If not, I will close the.
Well, I would. I mean, I'll be speaking as Tom Connor, citizen, okay? Like everyone else, I think it's what's happening in and I'll say in Israel and Palestine is absolutely horrible. And, people, civilians, children are experiencing devastating suffering. And, and we got to focus for a minute, like Sarah says, on the children. And the children, we must think about them as separate from any individual governments. This is my own opinion, and any causes. And, we're volunteer elected public school officials, and we represent the needs and the concerns of Piscataway children, and always must put them first. The thing is, though, we must do everything possible to protect innocent children, and must condemn hate in any form. The number of children that have been killed or currently living in agony is in the thousands, and we can't be blinded by the hate and the rage that is occurring, over there. And this is a humanitarian crisis, and we must face it that way. And, together for the children and the civility of our world, and that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Connors. Okay, with that being said, next on the agenda, we'll have the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam President. Please check out our superintendent report online as usual under the Superintendent's Corner. Highlights this month include an upcoming calendar of events, which is in every one, so please check that out. Some safety lessons, and a couple of articles about our community getting involved in our schools. And one in particular I want to make sure I thank, and that's the Rotary Club. Every year they reach out to us, and they really want to do a nice job in donating dictionaries to third graders. Did you all receive dictionaries when you were in third grade?
Mm-hmm.
No?
I did.
You did?
You probably did,
Right,
yeah.
so they've been doing that for years and years, and they go and they donate dictionaries to every third grader. But it's more than that. It's just the connection and the work that they do for our schools, and we really appreciate that. So we want to thank the people involved there. One of our state requirements in response to the pandemic, I have to bring this up, is to keep current with our safe return plan. All right, every 6 months. At this time, there are no changes since our last submission, the one that happened back in June. It'll be on our website tomorrow and open for public comment, and the public comment directions are on here. And at our December meeting, we will approve our safe return plan as part of the state requirements. All right, a couple more things here. I'd like to turn the floor over to Dr. Baskerville for a presentation on our NJSLA. And please forgive him, he's hobbling around a little bit. He's going to take off after his presentation.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to see all of you again. In August, we presented to you the NJGPA test and data, and we also presented to you access. What the state requires us to do is they give us the ISRs, the individual score reports, and then they give us 60 days or 30 days, whichever one they decide to do, in which we have to in turn appear before you to actually give you the information and the results of that. So in August, we gave you the NJGPA and the access, and tonight we're just going to give you a brief overview of the NJSLA and the DLM. I took a different approach in the curriculum committee and in the CNI department. We hash out a lot of data all the time. Instead of going through a bunch of charts and just throwing charts, I figured that I would extrapolate some information from the charts themselves, and then just give you the pages where the information comes from so you can refer to the charts on those pages. So if you would go with me to page 2 and 3, which are the highlights, focus areas, and ELA and math, and then we can just, and you can basically just keep your fingers around pages 7 and 8 and so forth, and that's where the corresponding charts are that will give you that information. So just follow me on page 2. There was a 2-year gap, 2019 and 2020, between the administration of the NJSLA from 2018 to the return in 2021. As you know, we had the Park assessment prior. The Park assessment ended in 2017-18, and 2018-19 was the return of the NJSLA. The NJSLA returned in 2018-19, and then it was wiped out for 2 years because of the pandemic. So there was a 2-year gap, 19 and 20, between the administration of the NJLSA from 18 to the return in 2021. All of our tested grades, 3 through 8, as well as the high school, and again, I want to also say the state in general and across the state, saw a decline in the 2021 ELA scores from the 2018 test administration. All of our grades in our schools showed that, except King at grade 5, that had an increase of 3%, which can be seen on pages 7 and pages 8. Using 2021 as a baseline, there were positive gains at all levels for the 2022 test administration, and that is where we really want to continue to focus. With some as high as 15% for Kanakamak grade 8, Quibbletown grade 6, they both had 15% increases in ELA, 13% for Shore at grade 8 and Quibbletown grade 7, and that can be seen on page 8 as well. The state average for grade 3 was 42% in ELA. Our district was 48%, so we were ahead of the state there. 3 of our schools outperformed the state. Grandview was at 45%, Knollwood at 55%, and Randolphville at 58%. Although Eisenhower was under the state average at 35%, Eisenhower's score increased from the 2021 to the 22 by 6 percentage points, and we can see that also on pages 4 and 7. At the intermediate level, both of our schools at all grades were either at the same score from the previous year or higher than the state average. MLK grade 4 was 16% higher than the state. MLK grade 4 came in at 67% proficient, and the state was at 51. MLK grade 5 was 10% higher than the state at 63, and the state was at 53. That can be seen on page 7 as well. As we seek to address issues of disproportionality, and we have constantly been doing that for years, we looked at subgroup data as well, and the state requires us to present to you subgroup data. And we can see at the subgroup data that the Hispanic demographic had an increase of 7% from 35 to 42% in the elementary schools, 6% from 39 to 45% in the middle schools, and 2% from 39 to 41% at Piscataway High School. And that can be seen on page 5. Gender subgroup data reveals something that females continue to achieve higher at every level. That's elementary school, middle school, and high school. Than the males, and each group increased from the previous year. That can also be seen at page 6. I also want to just bring you back to the African American demographic proficiency statistic. We see that there was and the numbers missing there was a decrease of 4% from 36 to 31%. But then that can be a little misleading, because in 21-22 there were 166 students tested, and they made up 31% of the students tested. And in 22-23 there were only 139, so there's a decrease in the number, which made up only 29%. As in ELA, I'm on page 3, all of our tested grades 3 through 8 saw a decline, as well as the state. And the 2021 math scores from 2018, except King again at grade 4, which remained flat at 61%. That can be seen on page 12. Using 2021 as a baseline, there were positive gains at all levels for the 22 test administration, with some as high as 13% at Eisenhower, 15% at MLK, grade 5, and 10% for Arbor, grade 4. So we are proud of the gains that we have seen across the board. At the middle school, Kanakamak Algebra 1 saw an increase of 15% and had a proficiency rate of 83% for Algebra 1 versus the state at 35%. So that was a good gain as well. Similarly, in Algebra 1, Shore saw a gain of 16% and had a proficiency rate of 85% versus the state at 35%. Positive gains were also seen at Piscataway High School for Algebra 2, and that can be seen on pages 12 and 13. In mathematics, again, the state average for grade 3 was 46%, our district's 48%, again, outperforming the state. Now, look at this. Randolphville was at 72% proficient in grade 3. Knollwood dipped to -12, and we can see that on page 12. At the intermediate level, both of our schools at all grades were either at the same score from the previous year or higher than the state average. MLK, grade 4, 17% higher than the state. MLK grade 4 was 61% versus the state at 44. MLK grade 5 was 20% higher than the state at 60%, and the state was at 40%. That can also be seen on page 12. And also, as we seek to address issues of disproportionality subgroup, again in our Hispanic demographic, There was an increase of 10% from 24 to 34% in the elementary schools. We're really beginning to catch it as it matriculate through the grades. -1 from 20 to 19 in the middle school, which statistically is flat, and 2% from 11% to 13% in Piscataway High School, which can be seen on page 12. Similarly, our African American demographic proficiency rate increased by 7% from 27 to 34% at the elementary schools. This is in math. An increase of 4% from 17 to 21 in the middle schools, and a decrease from 14 to 13% at the high school, statistically a flat number. And gender subgroup data reveal that females continue to achieve higher at every level than males, and each group increased from the previous year. I also want to say that there's something that we see in the middle school, where there's a change in middle school from the math proficiency in gender, where the males are outperforming the females in gender in the middle school. If you could turn with me now to page 17, we see our DLM. As per New Jersey DOE, alternative assessments measure the knowledge and skills of students with significant intellectual disability. These are students with IEPs. The state requires that the state test 1% of the state population for DLM, and the district is supposed to test 1% as well. We did 1.3%, representing a waiver to actually do that above 1.1%. These alternative assessments support student independence in the greatest extent possible and allows this small population of students to demonstrate their knowledge. The DLM assessments are based on essential elements, and we see some essential elements there in ELA for grade 1. The assessment is administered to students with significant disabilities who meet the participation requirement as determined by the IEP team in grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 11. Science is given in grades 5, 8, and 11. Achievement levels range from emerging to advanced. In the spring of 2023, we tested 1.3% of students, general and special education, who were scheduled to take a test in the spring of 2023. Highlights include, one of the big highlights that we had was, and even though these are different students, but we can kind of see, in grade 4, we were at 43% at target or advanced in mathematics, and last year we were at 30%. So that was a big increase there in the DLM. And we see grades 5, 18% at ELA, grade 7, 25, grade 11, 33%, and grade 5, 18% in math. And I want to bring your attention lastly to pages 18 and 19, because not only do we show you where we are numerically, but we just give you some idea of some of the interventions that we have in place. And this is not all that we do, it's just a couple. I just want to highlight the IDEA CEASE funds that we use for support specialists working with Tier 2 and Tier 3 students. So we've increased the support specialists from just doing Tier 3 to Tier 2 and Tier 3 to get those borderline students. SWAG, students working to achieve greatness at the high school for academic and behavioral interventions. William H. Sadler Resource for Vocabulary from 4 to 8. And those who've been around for a while know that we've had a situation with vocabulary in the elementary and in the intermediate schools. So we have the Sadler Resource, which is doing a great job for vocabulary in 4 through 8. And we're using Just Words for vocabulary K through 3. Letters training, language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling. We use SF Title II funds for framing your thoughts for writing. District Learning Acceleration Guides, school and district PD and strategic plans. SEL4NewJersey.org, the CASEL 5, which is essentially the state's curriculum for social and emotional learning. Vertical articulation of curriculum, the use of a district adaptive supplemental technology resources, disaggregation of data, building-based in-person, and where applicable, virtual tutorial programs, differentiated instruction, homogeneous small groups, and allocate staffing resources, content coaches, and counselors to provide intervention strategies.
Has your brain hurt yet?
Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
When I was like in intermediate school, there was something called WIN, which was like
Yes.
a what I need. Like,
Yes.
They would pull in kids.
We
like-
still have one.
I was wondering if there was like something so like.
WIN
that.
was in the elementary schools. Actually, it started in the elementary and in the middle schools as well. It was in both. But we eliminated WIN in the elementary schools, but it remains. We have WIN in the 4, 5s, and the 6 through 8.
Okay. Is there like something similar in place for like elementary schools?
With the programs that were offered in elementary school, because the WIN had to take up a time and a period. So when we changed the curriculum in the elementary schools, then we were able to adjust those needs through the curriculum in the classroom versus adding another part to the schedule to pull the kids out.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. B.
Thank you.
I just want to say something about the material here. We value this material for what it's worth and what it gives to us. You've heard me say this before. Our kids are not data points on these pages. It gives us an indication on how well students did that particular day. So we want to make sure that all of the other work we do, making sure kids feel safe in their environment and comfortable with what they do, then these things will come. I talk about my kids a lot, and I feel I could do that because it's safe to do that because they're my kids. Nobody could say I couldn't talk about them. I have 3 kids, and they're all in college right now, and 2 out of the 3 of them are horrible on any kind of these state tests, any kind. 2 of them didn't even submit SATs when they applied to colleges because they took them and they did so poorly. All 3 of them, particularly the 2 younger ones that didn't do their SATs, are doing extremely well in their college programs, and one's studying to be a teacher and one's studying to be a nurse. So, we take this information for what it's worth, but in no way does it mean in any way how successful someone's going to be in life. So just wanted to make sure that I said that as the educational leader here, and hopefully the board supports me in that mission, because it's really important that kids feel safe in their environment, and we'll see more about that in our next presentation. But that's how we truly feel here, and I'm really proud to be part of that kind of feeling of an environment. So, Dr. B, thanks. Get home safely.
All right. Our next certification topics that we had picked but we hadn't gotten to yet are going to be student achievement and the role of the board and curriculum. And I think when we delve into the student achievement one, a lot of what you say is going to resonate. And if you can read beforehand about student achievement, there's an awful lot in New Jersey school boards that do that.
All right, so moving on, our district has been investing in taking care of kids, like I just mentioned, for a long time. I've been here 10 years, and we've always done it. Last year, we began the process of an equity audit in partnership with Lenny Stevenson, and you'll hear from her in a couple of minutes, to try to gauge on how well and how inclusive our district is, and not just in what we see every day. Our extracurricular activities, our lunchroom, our hallways, the class offerings that we have, our buses, things like that. So Lenice did some surveys and some research, and I'm going to turn the floor over now to Alex Gray to introduce the program a little bit more. But we're really excited to find some data that you've uncovered. So, Alex.
All right. Dr. Nelly, there's nothing wrong with talking about our kids. In fact, many people that have seen my presentations, not only do I talk about my children, I show pictures of them as well, whether they like it or not. So, but I believe as an educator, my children have given me the most data, the most information, the most passion to do the work as an educator. So it's nothing like having our children to inform the work that we do. Honorable President Cherry, Vice President Connors, our esteemed board members, Dr. Nelly, Superintendent, and my fellow cabinet members, thank you for the opportunity for us to share this evening. Dr. Nelly and I sat down last year, a year into this position as Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and I talked to him about how districts bring in speakers and bring in PD and do work without fully assessing where they are as a district, without talking to the stakeholders and allowing the children, the families, the staff to share what their needs are. So I did not want to be a DEI leader and use my own thoughts or my own, insight to try to predict what we needed. I wanted to know altruistically and genuinely what our district needed and what our strengths were as well. And so with the support of Dr. Anelli, with the support of you as board members, we were able to engage in a search process, a national search process to find a company and more importantly, a passionate leader to guide us in this work of conducting a district-wide equity audit. And so that work began. last winter into the spring, and we are pleased to be able to share our progress as well as information about where we're going to go from here. We had a committee that sat down and looked at these companies who gave us proposals for this work, and we were in agreement with selecting the Center for Applied Research and Equity under the founder and CEO, Dr. Elenice Stevenson. She's also a researcher and a professor at Johns Hopkins University. And so on paper, she looked good, but more importantly, when myself and my partner in this work, Noelle April, when we were able to sit down with her and begin to meet with her, we realized that this was not a job for her or a position. It was her calling to help districts move forward with their work in equity and to bring out the best in their district. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Elenice Stevenson, and she will walk us through the progress we've made thus far with our district-wide equity audit.
You can't make me cry before I start. Oh my goodness. Board President Cherry, Dr. Vanelli, Vice President Connors, thank you, and all of the esteemed board members, thank you so much for even providing the opportunity for me and anyone else to study your district. I know how it feels for someone to come in and to open up and say what's going on here, but it has truly been a pleasure to serve you all. I'll talk a lot about what we've seen, the why behind the data, and I want to I'll say this. I have never seen data so positive, especially when we talk about adults, ever. In all of my years of research, in all of the research that I had to engage in to earn my doctorate, and that has served as a protective factor. When I looked at the data, I wanted to understand why adult perceptions were so strong. And then we had an opportunity to go and observe the adults in the buildings and the students as well. And I just could not believe what I saw. The adults have such strong ties, and I wanted to, even before we look at the numbers, to talk about that. We typically have a lot of challenges when we want to solve problems in schools. And one of the biggest challenges are the adults. You don't have that problem here. And that's enough to be said from the way in which you recruit, hire, vet your teachers, your faculty, your staff. They love being here. And I have never seen the numbers that you're going to see today. And so I wanted to just pause there to say you all have done such an amazing job. So, all right.
Ready?
Yeah. And so, as Alex has already introduced me, my name is Dr. Elenice Stevenson. I have a personal mission, but also a company mission and a research mission to transform environments into spaces where every single stakeholder who walks through the door in this school environment feels safe, feels welcomed, feels challenged, and feels seen. And I know belonging is the big buzzword now, but we've been doing this work for almost 10 years. And so the way in which we do that is we first study the problems that are here. And I want you to think about problems not in a negative perspective, but just bringing to light what are the areas for improvement and what are things that we can celebrate, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. And from there, we identify areas for intervention. And these is like a recipe for success. Instead of taking a one-size-fits-all approach, we start with the data, and then we create a sustainable plan for transformational leadership. And so I wanted to just give you a very brief overview of the needs assessment, talk about, oh, sure.
Is that okay?
Oh, sorry.
So we can get the
Okay.
presentation on camera.
Okay. And talk about the survey administration. You may want to know how many responses we had for each of the surveys. And then we're going to talk about a lot of the quantitative findings, specifically in one area around belonging. I'll talk about some insights from the field in general so that you can understand what your data looks like as compared to other places. And then we'll talk about next steps. And so we engaged in an explanatory mixed method study, which means that we looked at the quantitative data to understand what the general perceptions of stakeholders were in terms of belonging, outcome expectancy, efficacy, and engagement. And then we analyzed that data and began to ask questions about why, which we're all going to be able to have that discussion today. And then the second phase is all about answering those questions. And so it allows us to go in, engage in site visits, focus groups, to answer questions about the interpersonal, internal, and institutional factors that contribute to all of the factors that we've already looked at, including engagement, belonging, outcome expectancy, and efficacy. When we looked at the survey demographics, we had a total of 2,877 students. These were all 6th through 12th graders who completed the survey, which is 78%. That is much higher than usual. The norm is less than 50%, and so we were able to capture most of the students, and that is attributed to the work that Ms. April and Dr. Gray did to ensure that all the students were able to take the survey. For families, we were able to capture 445 family members. We captured 150 more families once the school year started. The survey administration started during the summer. For faculty, 296 faculty members across the entire district, which is 30%, engaged in the survey, and that's more on par with what we typically see. And then over 90% of all school and district leaders, which is 43, completed the survey themselves. Okay. And so we measured several different factors, and the whole purpose of measuring many different factors is so that we can identify truly what are the root causes to the problems that we see. And so today we're going to focus on belonging, but I wanted you to know that we asked all stakeholders very similar questions so that we could have some comparative data, which you're going to see today. For parents, we're not going to be talking about parents' surveys today or results from their surveys, because we collected information about belonging from parents using open-ended questions. And so that's going to be analyzed with our second phase, which is the qualitative phase, answering the questions about why. And so I'm going to just give you a brief overview of belonging in general. So a sense of belonging is our innate psychological desire to authentically connect and relate to others. So after we've eaten, after we have shelter, we want to be loved and we want to connect. So it's salient to our overall health and well-being. And specifically in school, we describe school belonging as the extent to which students feel personally accepted, respected, included, and supported by others in the school social environment. And so those 4 dimensions are how we measure belonging. And you're going to see that that's what we've done with the measures. And so why is belonging important? Dr. Ranelli already told us why. Because belonging predicts motivation and achievement. And so often when we're measuring achievement, we call those lagging indicators. We can't do anything about it at that point. But if we can focus on making sure that students are in school, the adults are at work, and they feel connected to the environment, we know that they're going to be motivated and we know that they're going to achieve. In addition, we can't always control students' neighborhoods. And so what we can do is buffer those risks. And so belonging does that. We know if students are connected in school or to school, they stay in school longer. And so it allows them to thwart some of those challenges maybe in their neighborhood and community. And then we want our children to be emotionally well. And so belonging helps us to do that. And so these are the 4 measures that we use in order to determine the perceptions of stakeholders in terms of belonging. So we looked at identification and participation in school, perceptions of fitting among peers, generalized connections to teachers, and if we were analyzing the adult data, we're talking about to leaders, and then negative perceptions. So on the next few pages in your packet, you can see the 4 to 6 items that we use in order to measure each of these dimensions of belonging. And so for identification and participation, we looked at, we asked items like I feel like a real part of the school community, or sometimes I don't feel like I belong here. And you may ask, well, why do we ask both positive and negative items? And that's because we wanted to make sure that their responses were reliable. Okay? For perception of fitting in among peers, items like other students in this school take my opinion seriously, or other adults in this school, or it is hard for people like me to be accepted here. For generalized connections to teachers or generalized connections to leaders, we ask questions like, most teachers at this school are interested in me, or teachers here are not interested in people like me. So you were able to see that the questions that we asked range from positive and negative. And then the last measure specifically looked at the perceptions of belonging, either negative or positive. Okay? And so before we get into each of the measures, I wanted to just talk about some general trends that you're going to see. I began the presentation talking about how the perceptions of adults were way above the norm. And so when you look at the perceptions of students, I want to put that into perspective. Before the pandemic, we saw about 40% across the nation, 40% of students had a strong sense of belonging. But I conducted a couple studies during the pandemic, and we had about a 10% decrease on average for students' sense of belonging in school. And so when you look at the student data, it is more on par, actually it's a little more positive than what we see across the nation right now. So I just wanted to kind of put that in perspective. And so on average, we stated, or we celebrated data if about 60% of the stakeholders had a strong sense of belonging for that particular dimension, okay? What you're going to see before we move to the graphs is that every single time you see a blue or green, that's going to represent a positive or a strong sense of belonging. And when you see colors orange and red, they're going to be negative sense of belonging. And the reason why we kept the color coding aligned is because some questions or items were asked in a negative perspective, and others were asked in a positive perspective. All right, here we go. So we see that in terms of identification and participation in school, a little over 40% of students had a strong perception of their participation in school, as compared to 70% of your faculty and staff and 65% of your leaders. Looking at a couple items that contributed to that data, for the faculty and staff, 70% of them felt that they were a real part of the school community. And about 80% felt that they were very proud to work at their school. And so that is something to be celebrated. When we looked at perceptions, positive perceptions of fitting in among peers, almost 50% of students had positive perceptions overall of them fitting in among their peers, and between 73 and 74% of the adults felt that way. When we looked at the faculty and staff, 62% of the faculty and staff felt that other faculty and staff in the building took their opinions seriously. When we look at positive perceptions of generalized connections to stakeholders in the school community, we saw that more than 54% of students felt positive perceptions of their generalized connections. This is really important, and actually these were the highest percentages of positive perceptions of belonging among students. For faculty and staff, it was 67.8% and 75.6%. And so now we're going to talk about what about the students' perceptions contributed to that higher sense of belonging. And so when we look at the students have trusted adults. 58.7% of the students said there is at least one adult in that building that they can talk to if they have a problem. And we recognize that when we have at least one trusted adult in the building, students are more resilient and they're more persistent, and they're able to get their problems resolved much faster. Additionally, they felt that their teachers respected them. And what we see is that the adults felt the same way. 81% of the Teachers felt that there was at least one leader in their building that they could talk to if they had a problem. And 77.7% felt that the leaders in their school respected them. And as I stated before, this data is way more positive than we normally see. We see about 30%, so it just kind of puts things in perspective around the adults.
Dr.
Lastly,
Stevenson?
oh,
I'm
sure.
sorry, I do have a question.
Sure.
Because, I definitely love to celebrate the yellow and, or I should say the green and the blues. How do we close the gap for the oranges and the reds, though, specifically?
We're actually going to talk about that.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But those were of a concern, just to make sure, there's.
For sure.
And it's great to see that it's a relatively low number, but to see that in any regard in a red or an orange is of a concern, so.
For sure. I promise when we get to
Thank
the
you.
areas for improvement, we'll talk
I
about
just have a numbers question.
Sure.
When we're looking at percentage of people that participated in the survey, you see this is what the percentages are. So like district leaders, 90%, families, 78%, which is a pretty accurate, it is a like a strong representative of,
Sure.
but the faculty staff is 30%. So that raised like a red flag for me as we're sort of like looking at this and we have really strong numbers, which is what we want to see. But if 30% only participated, are we getting an accurate number of how our faculty and staff really feel? If, let's say, I don't know, 50% more didn't, right? So that would give us like about the same percentage or whatnot. So I guess my question is this too. What would be an average participation number when you're doing these surveys? So not to interrupt as you're doing it, but we're going over the data of like the pie charts and the numbers. I was just wondering, what's an average number who we expect to see completing a survey to get an accurate picture of how people are really feeling?
For sure. So to answer your question, 25 to 30%.
So this is a good
turnout. Without going too far into researcher terms, one of the threats to validity is going to be the response rate. What we see is if the demographics of the sample size align with the demographics of the population, then we see that that data is generalizable. So this is actually a good sample size. When we look at students, that is excellent.
Yeah,
When we
that's,
look at leaders, it's
it's really,
excellent.
that is impressive, because we're really getting an idea of how students feel when you're talking
sure.
about, pretty much 3/4 of our population.
For sure.
Lenise, I just want to add, Alex and I, along with Lenise, back in the spring, made the decision of timing when to give these surveys. So it kind of, with everything else that we do in our district, with other surveys that were going on, it kind of handcuffed us. And Lenise, please forgive me for
go ahead,
stepping
go
on
ahead.
your toes if I
Yeah,
am.
for sure.
We gave the survey to the staff June 6th.
End of the school year. I understand.
And we
That
had
makes
to before we
sense
hit
to
the
me.
Summer, and then September would have come, and it wouldn't have been good. So I'm less concerned with the amount of people taking, so if we gave it in April, we would have had 200 more people.
I just was questioning,
Right.
there's a
there's a
disproportionality
right.
between a percentage of people who, like your leaders and then your students, which is fantastic. So that just caught my eye as far as like a disproportionality of
But it's nice to hear that
participants.
that's a good number to generalize.
It's funny, I was gonna ask that question, and that was my question. So what jumped out at me was exactly the N equal 296 and 30%. And someone who's done a lot of consumer research in my time, you said accurate, but I was wondering if that was significant, in terms of the numbers. Not so much the time, it could have been higher if it was done at a different time, but that was the exact same question. Jumped out at me is the 30%. And in your experience in doing these things, it is significant even at that level.
And I think that's important to know.
For sure,
Yeah, that's an average response rate.
Yes.
Because then you're falling in, then you can interpret your data and know that it, like you said, it is reliable and it is
Yes,
valid.
we reached the critical mass, yes. Great question.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. Sorry.
It was okay, that's okay. All right, and then lastly, positive perceptions across the board in general about belongingness. We see that 55.7% of students have positive perceptions in general about their belongingness, and around 70% of the adults do. Okay? So the last four graphs that we see focus on both the students and the faculty. And so these were negatively worded, and that's why I said if we focus on the green and the blue, it makes sense. And so 66.6% of the students said that they feel accepted in school. Okay? 60% of students said that they feel like they belong in school. That is to be celebrated. 42% of the adults said that their leaders make their job exciting and promising, and 44.9% of adults said that when rules and policies are enacted, they are fair. Okay? And then lastly, focuses on accomplishments being adequately rewarded in school for the adults, and 36.8% said positive or had positive perceptions about that. The reason why I included this graph is because we saw almost 30-30-30, a third of adults either saying, rating their perceptions as neutral, positive, or negative. And so that's something that we may ask why about, right? And so now we're going to move on to areas for improvement. And so I wanted to talk very quickly about how we were able to identify areas for improvement. If we saw that about a quarter of the stakeholders had negative perceptions about their belonging, we said that that was salient, okay? And so on average, 21 to 31% of students had a lower sense of belonging in some of the dimensions, and as compared to 4 to 13% of the adults. And as I stated, the reason why is because we had atypical data for the adults. They really are deeply connected to the school community. And so about a third of the students had negative perceptions about their identification and participation in the school community. And what attributed greatest to that data is the students feeling like a real part of the school. We often see that this data is this way if a large amount of students just rate themselves as neutral. And so there's a lot of factors that can contribute to that. It could be that how the students felt on that day. It could be just what time they took the survey in terms of what happened in the class before that. So when we look at that data, we have to take a lot into consideration. For the perceptions of fitting in, we see about a quarter of the students rated either disagree or strongly disagree there. And what contributed the greatest to that was around students' perceptions of their peers taking their opinions seriously and them being able to be authentic. We know that the students in 6th through 12th grade are adolescents, and so they are hyper aware of their status in the school. And so we may see more negative perceptions simply because they don't always believe that the people in their school, their peers, feel good about them. But once again, it's a day-to-day thing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. And then negative perceptions of their generalized connections. About 2 in 10 students felt that they had negative perceptions of their generalized connections, as compared to about 1 in 10 of the adults. And one of the reasons why is because they wanted the adults to feel more interested in them. Once again, it's about perception. And so the adults may be doing a really good job at this, but the students are not perceiving it that way. So being able to ask those questions about why the students are not perceiving that will help us to glean into interventions to support students in that way. And then lastly, negative perceptions of belongingness in general. About 20% again, a little over 20% of students said they did not have a strong perception of belonging in the school community. And it's because they felt very different than most other students in their school. And I already spoke about how adolescents are hyper aware of their social connections and their identity and social worth in the school at that point in their adolescent stage. And so now I want to put the data in perspective because the numbers only tell us the what. I want to talk about some, and I'm actually going to bring Dr. Gray up as well to talk about some of the insights from the school visits that we conducted about 2 weeks ago, actually during Spirit Week, which was amazing. And so we were able to visit all of the middle and high schools, and or the middle schools and the high school. And what we saw, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Okay.
you know, being in one building most of your career as an educator, you're in one school, and you don't always get a sense of how things are from school to school. And so it was enjoyable to be able to make the visits, Lanice, Noel, and myself, to the 3 middle schools during various times of the day. We went to openings of school. We went to dismissals of school. We were there during lunches. We found out one of the schools had an assembly, so we went back to that building for the assembly that day. And so we even got in a little time last night at the football game. And so we were able to really get a sense of just what is the culture. You know, again, numbers tell you one thing, but what does the culture tell you? And so the people are our strength here in our community. And so, and I know Dr. Anelli talks about data and numbers, and they don't tell the full story. And so seeing the people that are working with our children, seeing the genuine nature in which they interact and they engage, but also just seeing the camaraderie, colleague to colleague. Recognizing, like myself, a Piscataway graduate, how many of us work in this district that are graduates of Piscataway. I'm putting that into full view of that we care enough about this community that we came back and want to stay and continue to work and give back to this community. And that is the strength that we saw that the numbers can't tell you. That you have to actually put your feet on the ground, get into the building, interact, walk the halls, talk to students, talk to staff, talk to administrators, and you get a sense of why there is a strong sense of connection from our staff, and why even with the numbers, for students seeming low in some areas, that globally they're still higher than average. And that's what we have to keep sight of. Sometimes they look a little lower because our numbers of staff belonging are just so high that it made sometimes the student numbers look a little low, but it's not because those students' numbers are low, it's just we have just such high numbers of our staff fulfillment here. And so you know that from being around the schools, and Lanice got a sense of that by her visiting our buildings as well. We haven't even hit the preschool and the K-3s and the 4 or 5 yet, which we're going to do.
But if I can make a comment, I mean, and giving a lot of credit to Superintendent Dr. Rinelli during the last couple of years, and when we all go out to our liaison schools and give like the 8th grade, little speech, et cetera. And something Dr. Rinelli told me, and we incorporate everything, is that if you could connect with like one person, anybody, the custodian, the nurse, the SRO, anybody, that's a good thing. And I wanted to piggyback that on how, it may be kind of a joke that we're up here as like, unsung heroes, but Kimberly Lane at the state level made a suggestion about going out to the entire state and awarding unsung heroes. Those, not just the teachers, but like again, the custodians, the bus drivers, everybody, blah, and it was a great program. And I think that we've had a lot of that, is what I'm saying, in the last couple of years, and I want to give credit to him. Yeah.
And you're absolutely right, Dr. Connors, and Mrs. Lane, that was phenomenal, because we spoke to custodians, we spoke to SROs, and we pretty much saw an equal connection to the student body, not just like teachers and principals, but other staff members who were there. We talked to the lunch, we sat down with, we went and talked to a whole group of the Sodexo people, and again, the connection is there, very impactful, very impactful, and so it's not just teachers. Everyone, those unsung heroes, are just as connected. And many of our students, if you were to ask them, some of them, it is that, worker, cafeteria worker. It is their bus driver maybe, or that custodian who is their safe person, or the person that they go to, that trusting adult. And so we have a lot of that going on. The coaches, so many people in our district, adults that are those trusted adults for our students.
For the educators in the room, and I know the board members, when I go places, I like to go visit schools, whether it be colleges or high schools or whatever. When you walk into a building or on a campus, you just know. Right? You just know if it's a welcoming place. Kids are smiling, they're wearing Piscataway shirts, they're wearing their college shirt, whatever it may be. So we try to put people in buildings as leaders, right? And that's, I give you suggestions and you guys support it. We put people in buildings, so we're gonna create that culture of putting kids first and wanting to be there. So it's really important that you walk into buildings and you just know, right? Is the SRO smiling, right? Is the secretary's happy? They all belong to the building too. It's their school. We have to make sure that everybody kind of understands that we work for them, right? Nobody works for me. I work for everybody else. Alex, right? Glenn, Colleen, and the board. We push up everything for everybody else. So it's really important that we walk around and understand that we work for them, and we put people in places that really embrace that culture of being really strong.
And I do have to say, it's one thing that I felt, whether I identify myself in a building or not, since in the community overall, living here close to 30 years, right? But being on the board and, being present at, as many places as I can be, it's one of the things that I felt, the overarching belongingness and the exuberance and the just the positive spirit that exists within the confines of our buildings and even at our events. It's been very enlightening, and the caliber of our students, like their performances, their speeches that they give, their presentations, it has been so amazing to see, and I mean that with all my heart and soul. It's really why I genuinely love what I do as a board member, and I wish I could do it full time, but of course I have a full-time job. But it's something that it makes me very, very proud. And again, this information is compelling and it's overall positive. I have an affinity for those who may feel like they're not at a level playing field, right? I want to make sure that there's equity. Some of us here are wearing capes tonight, but just know, sometimes superheroes can also be, unsung or undercover, right? But it's, we want to ensure for equity, right? We want to ensure for inclusion. And, it's so key. And I think that we're doing such a great job of it in the district. It's pretty amazing. And I think we should all be proud of that. And of course, you are the heroes. So.
And so,
thank you.
To answer one of the questions that you had, I promised that we would talk about
Yes,
it, right?
thank you, thank you.
The very first thing, the reason why we focus on belonging first, we have a lot of other data that we have looked at, is because I talked about school improvement is people improvement. Mm-hmm. And so if you have good people, that is, you're starting, if we were 0 to 100, you're starting at 51, mm-hmm. Okay? And so we were able to also look at, although we're not talking about it today, we were able to look at some of the factors that may contribute to the belonging perceptions for those adults and students in those, the red and orange areas. Mm-hmm. And so we'll be able to provide you later some of the factors that may have contributed to that. It also came out in some of the qualitative data that we're going to be talking about later. But I'm going to show you some of the interventions that we have in place, or we may have in place, as a result of the data. And so that will likely answer your questions, but if not, I can continue. And so I've been conducting these studies across the country and helping school districts to solve the problem. So I'll talk about some of the ways in which we've actually solved the problem, because I think that's important to understand. And so typically after this needs assessment, I'll then be able to provide almost a 200-page report to you all. In that report, it's going to include a proposed strategic plan 3 to 5 years. And so you're able to look at every single data point, all the orange and red, and be able to identify a strategy in order to address that issue, a strategy that, of course, is research informed and has been used more recently to solve the problem. A lot of times, the interventions focus on professional learning. So not just a sit and get kind of professional learning experience, but really delving into educational cases that are a little removed from the environment, but allow the educators to really take a deep dive into their practices, their understanding of who they are, why they show up the way they do, and how they support their students. And then we typically target disproportionality, as we were talking about earlier in a couple of the presentations, the way in which the curriculum instruction is presented to students, asking ourselves, do students see themselves reflected back in the curriculum? And then school discipline, looking at subjective versus objective discipline practices. We often see that subjective discipline practices are where we begin to see disproportionality more than the objective school discipline practices. And then opportunities for students to engage in advanced pathways starting in elementary. And so these are just some of the ways in which we have seen us address the issues around equity. And then if there is no equity policy or no policy that focuses on equity, then we are able to help the district to develop a policy and or revise that policy. All right? And so in terms of next steps, so if you look at the timeline on slide 44, we have so far engaged in a root cause analysis, collected internal data, developed the surveys, administered the surveys, and now we're focused in November, December, and January on school site visits, planning focus groups for all stakeholders, conducting those focus groups, and then analyzing that qualitative data. That's going to take us into March. The analysis of qualitative data is much longer than the surveys, right? And so it takes a little longer to do that. And then you'll be receiving the report findings in April, the strategic plan in May, and the professional development regarding how to implement the strategic plan in June. All right?
Does the plan, you know, having been around for a while, and when we first thought about looking into disproportionality, it came about from looking at scores and so on. But there's K through 3, there's 4, 5, there's 6, 7, 8, and then 9 to 12. Is it going to include those transitions? Because when you is there a linkage to the NJ results, some of the things that we saw? Because it seemed that we saw at one point, and that's why we started the dish problem, that kids coming out of 4 and 5 that were like A students in math, all of a sudden when they got 6, 7, 8, why all of a sudden weren't they the A students anymore? Certain things happen. So is it going to include that kind of thinking?
Yes, it's going to include a couple different literature reviews on those transitions. There are a myriad of factors that impact the ways in which students transition from one level to the other. If you can think of how the student, number one, the student to teacher ratio in your elementary schools versus middle schools versus high schools, very different. And so the ability for the adults to be able to get to know their kids very well makes it difficult. Additionally, there's more responsibility that's placed on the students as they matriculate through the school levels. That's very different. In elementary school, students are only seeing maybe 2 to maybe 4 adults, where in high school, something different every day. And so we talked earlier about some of the factors that actually buffer those challenges, like participation in extracurricular activities earlier on, especially if those activities are provided in elementary, middle, and high school. For example, the band, a lot of times you'll see the opportunities to engage in the band all the way through. And so students who have participated in those extracurricular activities have a much stronger resilience when they're transitioning from one school level to the next. Any other questions?
I don't have a question, I just wanted to make a comment.
Sure.
I just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Gray, Ms. April, and yourself for engaging in the work and getting the surveys and continuing with the process. Thank you for bringing that to us. And we as a board, I'm sure, especially me as an individual, are very excited to get as much data as we can in order to bring as much of our community and stakeholders together through our variety of committees and so on. So it's vitally important information. I'm thanking you all for bringing it here. Thank you, Superintendent, for spearheading and helping and all that good stuff. Thank you.
It's
nice to see. It seems like we're way above the curve. Like to
You
be
really are.
really looking at this kind of data, asking the questions, developing a plan. It really is. It's probably a model for many other school districts.
Yes, we
to,
talked about that yesterday. It's a national,
really
it
be
could a national
self-reflective
model, for
in
sure.
order to make a positive change in our entire community.
For sure.
So I'm proud to, be a part of this, and I thank you, and, Dr. Gray, and, Dr.
Yeah,
Hill. I
we-
mean, it really is. I have a feeling we are going to be
Yeah,
a
we have-
model.
There's a lot of positive data, and we're all happy about that, but we know we're not perfect. There are areas that we do need to address, and this information will help us, and we appreciate that. Rahim, you had a question?
Yes.
First of all, thank you for doing this. Usually I would have left by now, but
Because we're really boring, Rahim, I get it.
but I was genuinely interested in hearing the data that you had to present, so I stayed. I did have 2 questions because shout out to Mr. Siri, my AP stats teacher, because I'm currently taking stats, like learning all about this. So I was wondering, like, obviously we had like 70% of students respond, which is amazing, like getting teenagers, like as a teenager, getting some people to respond. But with that, like, if I remember correctly, teachers directed students to like do the survey within class. So is there going to be like exploration of like a bias in like the answers, because a lot of students like just do it to get it done, and usually like not for all, but some students may have just chosen answers. So will that be explored? And then also, I know like in the next steps, like you have specific groups you're gonna be talking to, because like for example, like 21% had a negative perception of connections to teachers in school, but like are there specific like samples going to be taken based on like is that academic students, honors level classes, AP students, like is there going to be that? Because like recently I tutored, and I just like saw a disconnect based off of like the levels those students were in, or like even sampling from affinity extracurricular groups that we have, like the Hindu Student Association, the Muslim Student Association, or like Chiefs for Christ. So I just had like, if that's gonna be
Okay, so you asked me 2 questions. Let me get to the first one first. And so, it's okay? Oh, okay. So when we talk about how we are able to overcome the threat to validity, which is students just said AAA or BBB, the purpose of asking those, let's say the 6 items, we looked at perception of fitting in, we asked the negative questions, and we asked the positive questions. We then run a test in order to look at reliability. And so reliability tells us whether or not the students just selected AAA or BBB. So it allows us to overcome that. Secondly, when we're looking at the data to identify the perceptions of stakeholders who were lower, right? We then disaggregate that data to look at those subgroups. And from there, we develop the focus groups based on that.
Got it. Thank you.
Makes sense?
All right, questions.
Thank
Very
you.
good.
Rahim, you want to switch seats?
Have a good one. Thank you.
Ladies, thank you very much for really nice job.
Great,
Really
great. Yeah,
good.
really great.
I just have 3 more announcements, short announcements. Our next strategic planning meeting, there are flyers in the back, is set for November 14th, Tuesday, and we talk about a sense of belonging, and this is a perfect way for stakeholders, students, parents, educators to come and be part of what our district might look like for the next 5 years. Also, our school calendar for 24-25 is on the agenda for approval tonight. If it gets approved, it'll be on the website Monday. No later than Monday, you can start your planning for the calendar for the next year. And as a couple of our board members pointed out, there's some things going on in the world that are extremely sad. Thanksgiving is coming up, and I would normally just say everybody have a happy Thanksgiving, right? But it's important, I think, for us to be able to say nothing is more important than the quality of our relationships that we have with people. So please, I hope you all, our community, can find peace and spend some quality time with your family and friends. So happy Thanksgiving, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Manelli. Next on the agenda, we have Personnel and Labor Relations, Ms. Nancy Salgado Cohen.
Be it resolved that the following motions identified as A through C be approved as presented.
Second. Mr. Secretary, can you please take the roll?
Mrs. Cordino?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Sheehy?
Yes, abstain from B1.
Salgado Cowan,
Yes.
Ms. Scotto,
Abstain.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Connors,
Yes.
carried.
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Is anyone here wanting to speak under public announcements? If not, then I will not open that up. I will make a motion. Can I have a motion to close public announcements?
Motion?
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next on the agenda is committee reports. Dr. Connors?
The Fiscal Planners and Operations Committee met last night to discuss food services, the business office, and more. Energy Savings Improvement Program, the final 2 transformer upgrades at Piscataway High School are scheduled for November 9th and 10th. Food services, free and reduced lunch applications. The district's free and reduced percentage is approximately 36%, which is similar to last year. Food service account balances, the committee discussed examples of accrued balances. Mr. Oliveira updated the committee on discussions between the New Jersey Association of School Business Officials and the New Jersey Office of Food Security. Dr. Connors suggested the creation of an ad hoc committee to consider policy recommendations. And the reason that I did that is that the committee feels that we cannot come up with on our own some positive ways to move forward on negative accrued balances. So we'd like to form an ad hoc committee so that we could take a look at whether it's in our policies currently, and if it actually, because some of the things in there we're doing, and we aren't getting any results, such as like, after so many things, you notify parents and it's just not happening. So the committee's suggesting that we do actually form an ad hoc committee because, we're at about 227,000 negative, and, we just want to make sure that we have food security for everybody, but at the same time, we're not, on that.
Understandable.
The New Jersey School Business legislative update is Dr. Connors discussed the involvement of New Jersey School Board Association in advocating for legislation, this is a good segue, such as universal school lunch would actually help going forward with this issue, because then the legislature would be on the line for actually like a statewide $250 million to actually, provide free universal school lunches. Staff shortages, school security, and school funding we talked about. Business office investment account. An additional investment of $1 million is on tonight's agenda, at which time the term investment rates will be assessed for further investment. The committee reviewed the current balance on the October 2023 NJ ARM statement and current interest rates. Maintenance, the committee reviewed the M1 and comprehensive maintenance plan. FEMA, the district, and this is actually great news, received the reimbursement for COVID-related expenses from FEMA. David, that was a large sum of money, right? That was
$421,000.
And Energy Star certification. Now, this is also really positive news. All of the district schools earned the EPA's Energy Star certification for 2023. That's all 10 schools.
That's awesome.
What?
Last year was 4.
Last year it was 4, so we went from 4 to all 10.
Wow.
And solar panels in every school, along with the efficient HVAC and light scheduling, helped in achieving the awards. And one other thing at this committee meeting, which I thought was great, is that we saw on the Zoom that we didn't know who the person was, and so we asked to introduce themselves. It was actually a student from Rutgers, because they had to sit in on a public meeting, and the person was studying, what was it, like math and accounting or something?
Statistics and.
And we thought she wasn't listening, and at the end, we asked her comments, and she was really listening. She was like, and a lot of good stuff. Anyway, Madam Chair, that's my report.
Thank you, Dr. Connors. It sounds like it was a very informative meeting last night, and definitely looking forward to the committee getting together and trying to come up with some solutions to an ongoing problem that I think will continue to grow based on the economy.
Yeah.
Okay, next we have approval of minutes. Ms. Lane?
Be it resolved that the following minutes be approved as submitted. Business meeting, October 12th, 2023. Executive session, October 12th, 2023.
Motion.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Fiscal planning and operations, Dr. Connors?
Be resolved that the following motions identified as items A through G be approved as presented.
Secretary, can you please take the roll?
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Ms. Rashid?
Yes.
Mrs. Salgado Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Scotto?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Cordino?
Yes?
Dr. Connors?
Yes.
Ms. Cherry?
Yes.
The motion's carried.
Policy, Ms. Smith.
Be it resolved that the following motion identified as item A be approved as presented.
Second?
Mr. Secretary, please take the
Just a
roll.
quick comment
Sure.
is that, I think, I don't know, maybe, the governor's has a task force on making comments on anti-bullying, and a couple of us, I guess, maybe sat in on that, so it hadn't happened because of COVID, so I know that we have our policy here, but the thing is that at least they followed up on with the task force.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Connors. Mr. Secretary, can you take the roll?
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Ms. Rashid?
Yes.
Mrs. Salgado Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Scotto?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Cordino?
Yes?
Mr. King?
Yes.
Dr. Connors?
Yes.
Ms. Cherry?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Curriculum, Mr. King.
Be resolved that the following motions identified as items A through E be as approved as presented.
Second. Mr. Secretary, can you take the roll?
Ms. Rashid?
Yes.
Mrs. Salgado Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Scotto?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Cordino?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Connors?
Yes.
Ms. Cherry?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Pupil Services, Ms. Cordino.
Be it resolved that the following motions identified as items A and B be approved as presented.
Second.
It's
Just a
A
note,
through
it's
C.
A through C.
Oh, I'm so sorry, A through C, my fault. Sorry.
Second.
Can you take the roll, Mr. Secretary?
Mrs. Salgado Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Scotto?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Cordino?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Ms. Rashid?
Yes.
Dr. Connors?
Yes.
Ms. Cherry?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Administrative and Auxiliary, Ms. Scotto.
Be it resolved that the following motions identified as items A through E be approved as presented.
Second?
Mr. Secretary, please take the roll.
Just note for the record, we have one additional conference that will be inserted as a part of item E. As such, Ms. Cordino, perhaps
Yes.
abstain on item E.
And a very quick note before you take the roll, wanted to thank publicly the Piscataway Soccer Club for donating seed and fertilizer to the school for the fields. That's wonderful.
Mr. Secretary, take the roll.
Ms. Scotto?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Cordino?
Abstain?
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Ms. Rashid?
Yes.
Mrs. Salgado Cohen?
Yes.
Dr. Connors?
Yes.
Ms. Cherry?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Old business, anyone with any old business to be announced?
Madam President,
Sure,
two
Mr.
quick
Beasley,
things.
go ahead.
Is that one, mark your calendars on the first one, is that we have a date and a time for our next, for our board self-evaluation. It's going to be Thursday, 2 weeks from tonight, Thursday, November 16th to 6:30 right here, and that's, we'll be reviewing
What time,
that.
what time, Tom?
6:30. We'll be reviewing our board self-evaluation that we did with the field representative from New Jersey School Board's Patty Reese. And then the second thing is that we're about halfway through our New Jersey School Board's board certification process with their member academy. We just need to schedule our next meeting and training, and that would be our fourth out of our 8. And remember, our 2 topics were going to be student achievement and the board's role and curriculum. If you do go to New Jersey School Board Association, you can search for student achievement, and what will come up is that there has been task force over the years, and you get a lot of nice data that actually will take everything that you heard tonight and put it in, and what Dr. Rinelli said about more than the numbers. Student achievement is about more than just the numbers, and take a quick look at that. And that's it, Madam President.
Thank you, Dr. Connors. Anyone else with old business? Anyone with new business? Ms.
I
Lane?
do, yes. Thank you so much, President Cherry. A few points to note as your Middlesex County School Board's representative from the Board of Directors. The next Middlesex County School Board's meeting will be on November the 28th at the Ross School in Woodbridge. That will begin at 6:45. Or you also have the option by way of your membership to NJSBA to attend via virtual. You would just need to sign up on the link that was sent to us by our NJSBA coordinator, Karen Callahan. You should have that in your email addresses. So if you'd either like to come out in person to the Ross School at Woodbridge, in Woodbridge Township on 11/28 at 6:45 p.m., or you could also join, if you wish, virtually. That's a plug for our school board meetings, which are always insightful. They will be covering off on the topic of sick leave for teachers. That's the topic of conversation that night, and I'm sure they'll have a number of other topics to cover off on. Just to recap, and thank you again, Dr. Connors, for mentioning the unsung superheroes in education. It was something that, it was an idea that was spurred by me attending an Unsung Heroes event for students, of which I was one back when I was in high school. I have an affinity for that and keep in touch with members of the Unsung Hero community. And having attended that for students, I realized that for support staff specifically, obviously we know that our teachers have our support, and we love the fact that we do a Teacher of the Year celebration. But I thought, how about for support staff? And when I had approached the executive director, Dr. Timothy Purnell, at one of the meetings in Trenton that I attended a number of months ago, I pitched him the idea and said, wouldn't it be great if we could honor support staff throughout our great state, be them librarians, coaches, school nurses, bus drivers, custodians, secretaries, crossing guards, paraprofessionals, and the like. And he said, you know, let me have you email me that information. And I didn't know where it was going, but where it went was hopefully something that will live on, and honoring these really vital and important roles of these folks who kind of sometimes are behind the scenes, right? And students tap into them and they trust them explicitly with their secrets or their hopes or their wishes or their fears, where they feel like maybe they don't have anyone else to count on. They can count on these folks, and they've been there, unequivocally. So it was my hope that it would go somewhere, and it did. And at our workshop in Atlantic City last week, it was the inaugural celebration of these unsung superheroes in education, and where we honored 11 people from districts across the state. And again, hopefully this will live in, time and time again as a legacy program. Got great response, and a lot of people attended. So it was really great to see the smiles on the awardees' faces as they accepted them. And hopefully, at some point we can nominate and get, some of our heroes up there on that stage. I think it would be great to celebrate them. So that was a great thing. And then one of the other things that I wanted to bring
I just
up.
wanted to add that for the first time doing this, there was over 200 nominations. 200, over 200.
That's pretty cool. So hopefully we'll see more going forward. One of the other things that I know, I follow the Department of Education on social media, and I did see, if you'll allow me here, the Department of Education has released a notice of grant opportunity for the next cycle of the Minority Teacher Development Grant, which provides funding to eligible organizations to place new teachers with emphasis on minority teachers in high poverty school districts in the state. Now, of course, we, may not be a qualifying district, but it's good to see that the DOE is putting forth these initiatives, and certainly something that I know, Mr. Oliveri, you look into grant opportunities every day, right, to see what's available to us. So it's certainly something that I'm hoping might spider out and be available to more districts in the state as we look to recruit and retain and attract top talent for our districts. So thank you very much. That concludes my new business.
I just want to make an announcement. It's not school related. However, we do have juniors and seniors next week who will be heading out on an HBCU tour. They will be visiting 8 colleges from the 7th through the 11th. They are going with their official transcripts with them, hoping to get an instant on-the-spot approval during these visits. Last year, they were actually able to achieve some of this, so I'm wishing all of them the best of luck and safe travels. So, figured we would want to know because we're always looking out for putting the kids first. And this is an opportunity most of them would not have a chance to do because your parents really don't map it out and saying, okay, we're going to hit 8 schools in 4 days. Like, I personally know that was not on my list of things to do. However, putting my child on that bus, I have no problem with 6 o'clock in the morning, and wishing them all well as they head out and go down the highway, do the traveling, take an experience being at a college, being able to eat lunch there, getting to talk to other students, speaking with administrators, just getting from under their parents' wings and seeing themselves soar without saying, okay, someone's looking over my shoulder. So they're going to be given this opportunity, and I'm super proud of all of them who will be going and wishing them well. And that's all I have to say. Anyone else? With that being said, the last announcement, adjournment. Can I have a motion? Motion. Can I have a second? All in favor? Aye. And we are officially adjourned. Great meeting, guys.
So the counseling, I'm sure the colleges will counseling.
You can't, like,